All right, hello everybody. Welcome to another edition of Unbiased America Live. It's what's it? September 10th today, right?
Yeah.
2015. We're here with our regular panel. We have Grant Phillips of the Modern Libertarian and We Are Capitalists. We have Grandpa Kevin Ryan, who is the purveyor of Unbiased America, as well as distinguished author Matt Palumbo of Being Classically Liberal. We have a special guest today who is a New York Times bestselling author, a historian, and a political analyst, Tom Woods, who has the Tom Woods Show, which you can find at tomwoods.com. I listen to it on iTunes because it's much better there. You don't have it's just you play it, you can listen to it anywhere, and it comes in very clearly. First question, Tom. You went to school. You have your degrees in history. Were you always? Was it politics that drove you to history? Was it economics that drove you to history? Was it just history that drove you into history?
Well, you're going to find this hard to believe, but it was communism that drove me to history, of all things. I was actually a math major, at least in my mind. I thought I would do math, and then while I was an undergrad, I grew up in a relatively conservative New England town, and I know that sounds oxymoronic, but there are conservative New England towns. Our town voted against John Kerry and Ted Kennedy in every single senatorial election. Didn't matter how corrupt the Republican was, we voted for that guy. So, it was the old-fashioned little town with the sheep shearing festival and the general store and everything. And then I went off to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it was an extreme culture shock for me. And on my way to the dining hall every single night, I would encounter what was literally, I'm not talking about like Hillary Clinton and I'm calling her a commie. I mean actual communists had a table every night selling their newspaper, and they'd be shouting out some inane slogan, and everybody else had the good sense to just ignore them and walk in. Not me. I've got to talk to them. I cannot allow them to go on in these errors of theirs. Now, of course, some dorky undergrad is not going to get them to change their minds, but that's what drove me crazy. I thought, I've got all the facts on my side. These people are lunatics, and I can't win. So I started reading everything I could. I got to learn more about the history of communism so I can go back and hit these people. And the more I did that, the more I decided, well, actually, this is kind of interesting. And I realized that all the math majors I would have been competing with, they were not, let's say, reading history in their spare time. Like, I was finding these people reading books on number theory in their spare time. And I thought, how am I going to keep up with those people when I have actual outside interests? So I decided to make my outside interest into my actual concentration. And so the communists turned me into a historian.
Wow. Okay. So it was you saw that these people were spouting things that you couldn't believe that they were saying they were untrue. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Right?
In fact, I remember distinctly being told that the Bolshevik Revolution had ushered in the freest society in the history of the world.
Wow.
That's just not true.
I think this
yeah,
book.
there you go. Yeah.
This is a very accurate history book. Would you agree, Tom?
Well, I bet you even Howard Zinn might find even that hard to swallow. Like, that's how out there.
I hear that's what they use at Harvard, though. This is the text.
Well, the thing is, I have to admit, when I was an undergrad there, it's true, we had some real propagandists, and you had to learn to avoid them. But by and large, the slant you got at Harvard was not like radical leftists. It was radical establishmentarian. You had people who had served in White Houses as advisors, as your professors. These weren't people who wanted to overthrow the government and establish the dictatorship of the proletariat. I mean, they wanted to give you the establishment version of history. So I know the establishment version of history inside and out, maybe at least as well as they do. But what I had to learn on my own really was everything else, stuff that would be left out, stuff that would be distorted. And the beautiful thing about being there was Harvard has the largest private library I believe it's in the world, or at least one of the largest private libraries in the world. And when I would go look up these old books, old critiques of the New Deal, the beautiful thing was, given the composition of the Harvard student body, none of these books were ever checked out. They were all sitting there on the shelf waiting for me.
Yeah, probably Thomas Sowell was probably the only one to use them before you.
Yeah, exactly. Or I remember, in fact, being at Columbia in the 1990s, and I remember checking out, some kind of book like this that only we would be interested in. And then like a couple of years ago, I picked up that book and I looked and I saw It's only been checked out once in the last 50 years, and that once was me.
Wow.
That was me,
I mean,
15 years earlier.
Here's Harvard supposed to be this bastion of critical thought and critical thinking.
Oh, it is the opposite.
And they're just getting one side of it. Look, I rail against academia all the time. In fact, I did so once, and Steve Horwitz got a little fired up. I think because I think maybe because he thought I lumped together everybody in academia, when in fact I meant that just the prevailing wisdom in academia is very one-sided. And I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I've been to school in New York. I've been here. It's and you brought this up. I mean, with the communists, they're incredibly postmodern. And when you do bring up facts, they don't. It's that's a construct. That's not true. And then they'll tell you that their construct is true. They'll tell you what is true. And then everything that you're saying, whether it's a fact or not, just really doesn't matter, as they elide all purpose and everything else from your argument. And that's my next question. You write about metaphysics and Catholicism. Was it the pursuit of truth that got you into that? Is that what got you into the Catholic religion?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I went off to college, I was sort of an agnostic and not really interested. And then I got to know, I mean, at Harvard you're going to find smart everything. You're going to find smart atheists, smart Christians, smart Muslims, just smart everywhere you go. So one day a guy who I think now he's with some big Georgetown think tank, Timothy Shaw is his name, took me out for lunch and said, now look, if you're intellectually serious, you must believe that there's a truth out there somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And aren't you interested in trying to get to the bottom of what that truth is? So he got me kind of on the path of going to various sorts of Christian churches and so on and so forth. But then, as I kept on reading, I just couldn't help being drawn to the tradition of thought of Thomas Aquinas. In fact, I devoted one episode of my show to going through one of the ways that Thomas Aquinas tries to demonstrate the existence of God. And it's very fashionable to say, oh, none of those work, and those are old-fashioned, and David Hume refuted them. I don't think any of that's true.
No, I don't think.
So I was really drawn to that.
I don't think I've heard a sufficient refutation to his 5 ways, to be honest, from what I've studied, and the common sense philosophy of Thomas Aquinas as well. It seems like, wow, how have I never thought of this? From some of his arguments, I don't know if you feel the same way. It seems pretty commonsensical that people seem to make more complicated, or certainly people in academia, I think, tend to make more complicated.
Well, I think in general, what tends to happen is that because a lot of modern thinkers are thinking using modern philosophical concepts, they can't perceive what it is that he's trying to say. Mm-hmm. But there is kind of a renaissance of Thomistic studies as people go back and say, you know what, he hasn't been given a fair shake in recent years. So, and what's also nice is that when you meet medieval historians, you don't have to worry about ideology, because for the most part, a medieval historian believes that, as I think is correct, that there's been a caricature of the Middle Ages that we've had for the past 200 years, that everybody was an idiot and they all thought that thunder was caused by Thor or whatever. And that's not really right. And when you study that for a living, you don't really like being insulted all the time, being told that the stuff you study is full of stupid idiots. So when I would encounter medieval historians, I didn't have to worry about, well, is this guy a registered Republican or libertarian, or it doesn't matter. All I know is the person cares about scholarship and wants to overturn conventional wisdom, and so I have a kindred spirit in that person.
Oh man, I can go on about that all day, but I think it's going to bore everybody to tears. I wanted to ask about your Liberty Classroom. That's a site where people can go to learn about economics, history, constitutional law.
Yeah, it's economics, history, political thought, logic. We're going to do a history of economic thought. We have a course where we go through one of the most commonly used economics textbooks in colleges in the country. And chapter by chapter, we do a critique of that textbook, so that somebody who's in this sort of class can say, well, I don't know if what I'm getting is good, bad, in the middle. We can help him kind of understand what's really going on. So I designed this, or I came up with the idea for this about 3.5 years ago.
Is it a principles textbook?
Like Samuelson?
It's called, it's the Samuelson, it used to be just Samuelson, Paul Samuelson, Economics. But then he took on a co-author, Nordhaus. So it's the Samuelson-Nordhaus economics textbook. It is the best-selling economics textbook in world history. That's not a joke. It is the best-selling one. And we give it a thorough critique. So it's fun. And I've kept the price of it the same level it was when we had only 4 courses. Today we added course number 14 to the site. We're just going to keep on adding them. I got Bob Murphy's going to do history of thought for us, and then we do Q&A forums. You can ask any question you want. And it's not like this where we're doing this live and everybody's watching. The courses are all recorded. You can listen to them if you prefer audio. You can watch them if you like video at your leisure anytime. And you're going to get the kind of education that, frankly, I would have given my right arm for. I didn't get. I had to seek this out on my own. I had to supplement my official studies secretly at night. You know, you'll get the sort of information that we all feel like we should have got.
All
So
right,
that's libertyclassroom.com.
It sounds. I mean, what does it cost? $5 to join or something? Is it?
It's an annual subscription, and
Okay.
it's $99 a year,
Oh, that's
which is
not
about half of a community college credit hour.
right.
You will learn more in one day than you would in your whole community college career.
Oh.
But also, I give out a coupon code, so I'll give it out here. Think we're doing a show right now. That's how you remember it. It's coupon code SHOW in all caps. Drops it down to $69.
Okay, yeah. I mean, don't get me started on community college. I think in some of the subjects that's on Liberty Classroom, I went to community college and got stupider. If that's,
Well,
if that's
they've done
possible.
studies where people come out after 4 years and they know less.
No, I think Kaplan has done a study on that at some point. But yeah, I mean, literally, I'll go there and I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? And then it's ruining the things that I know. I'm like, what? Wait, what? Sometimes it bolsters them because I study more actually, but I don't know how many people do that. But one last question about yourself, and then we'll get to the panel. Who do you think is the greatest contemporary economist that's alive today, in your opinion?
Oh well, that's
I
a
mean,
a hard one because I have so many friends whose feelings will
right.
be.
Let me give you a category here. Not like the most influential, perhaps the most well known.
Influential. I don't know because I to me what matters isn't that just doesn't matter to me. What matters is are they right or not.
Right. No, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. So in terms of people who are right, unfortunately, a lot of the best ones don't write very much. Like Joe Salerno should write a lot more than he does. He's the academic vice president of the Mises Institute. He doesn't write that much, and that's a shame because he knows so much about monetary policy and theory. It's unbelievable. Like I have a friend who is an absolute genius, young guy, genius, and he says, when I think I know pretty much everything that I can know about economics, I go in and see Joe, and I walk out thinking, what a fool I am.
Yeah.
There are two people I would mention. One is a guy probably you've not heard of, Jeff Herbener. He's the chairman of the economics department at a place called Grove City College.
Yeah.
Almost nobody's heard of Grove City College except people in our circles. You'll know that Hans Senholz used to teach at Grove City College. They take no federal money of any sort, so they have no connection with the federal government at all. So you have no moral qualms about being there. He's the chairman of the economics department, and he teaches that course that I just told you about where he critiques the economics textbook.
Mm-hmm.
I've known him for over 20 years. I have been asking him questions for 20 years. I have never stumped him. So when I thought, who should I have teaching economics for libertyclassroom.com? Well, if you can't beat him, join him.
Right.
He's the smartest guy in the sense that he's ever bumbled a question. But then, of course, my very good friend Bob Murphy is really exploding in terms of productivity lately. He has a brand new book called Choice, and if you look at the endorsements, it's not just that he has the endorsements of 36 economists all of us on the panel respect, but the kind of endorsements, like people are saying he takes his place now among the greats like Mises as one of the true masters of the science.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, never in my life will I ever get an endorsement like that. So
you could
I count Bob in that group.
I think you could pressure Bill Gates for an endorsement. I know he read Meltdown.
Yeah, wasn't that incredible? We saw there was a photograph of Bill Gates's bookcase that was, I don't know, on Politico or I don't know where it was, and there's Meltdown sitting on the shelf.
That's pretty cool. Now we'll move to the panel. Who was it? I know Grant. Did you have a question on market?
Yeah, I was going to ask about Bernie Sanders recently. You and I did the show about Bernie Sanders, and now I want to ask you about him. He came out recently about immigration and said that it's a Koch brothers proposal and that it's just so we can enslave these migrant workers from foreign countries. And I saw your post today on Facebook, and it was spot on about immigrants. So I just wanted to get your take on immigration. And is it a Koch brothers proposal, or does it lead to greater prosperity for everyone?
All right. Let me tell people what you're talking about on Facebook. On Facebook today, and by the way, that post on Facebook has been viewed now by it's made impressions on 225,000 people's devices. that one question. The question was, if you think it's morally okay to help yourself to, the goods of the American rich, well, the average person in Bangladesh looks at you, and you seem to them like the 1% seems to you. You seem just as rich. So why can't they help themselves to what you have? It couldn't be a double standard, right, that you only care about equality when it involves you getting stuff as opposed to you having to give stuff to other people. Well, they don't know how to answer that. They're flailing around. They don't know how to answer that question. Now, in terms of immigration, I think it's actually more complicated than this. What's being led on by people like Brian Kaplan and others. I think there are complications here. There are figures that have come out recently about the incidence of welfare among people who are coming legally and illegally. It's about double the incidence of welfare. So I think we would have to say, and then there are always crime waves associated with mass immigration. That's been true all throughout U.S. history.
Would you attribute...
so hold on a second. So the point is, you can't just say, well, it's the free movement of people, so therefore by necessity it must have a good outcome. Not necessarily, especially because some of these movements are subsidized. People are making the movement because they know they'll get a subsidy.
Right.
If they weren't going to get that subsidy, they wouldn't have made the movement.
Right.
So the phenomenon is not necessarily itself a free market phenomenon. So I think it can't just be looked at as absolutely unambiguously a positive good. It could be, but maybe it won't be.
I totally agree. Hold on one second, Matty. I totally agree with that. But would you, Thomas Sowell has done a lot of work on this, and he talks about cultures as it relates to human capital of each culture and what skills they do bring. And and to your point, it's about what incentives do we create here for, like you said, some of it is subsidized. It's the incentives that perhaps that the laws have created in this country necessarily. Not that it's the fault of the people. It's just people that are illegal immigrants or legal immigrants that are coming here on an incentive structure that we had created, and they're just responding to it, looking out for their own self-interest, right?
Yeah, that's true. That is true, but I could say that about Americans, who were born in the United States.
Right, no
different. The welfare state gives them incentives too, but they're all the wrong incentives, right?
They're all wrong, right? No doubt about it.
This is not this. So I would say, now I realize this is not a popular thing to say, but who the heck cares at this point? Why couldn't we have a rule that would say you can come to the U.S., but you cannot receive any taxpayer benefits?
Yeah.
Now, because what I'll get some libertarians saying, well, you can't discriminate.
They hate that. Right.
Okay, that's true. I'd like to take it away from the natives, too.
I'm shocked that we agree on this.
Why can't we start here and say we would love to have people who are going to come and add to our society and bring us skills, and if you're one of those people, great, but if you're not, we're, sorry, but we just don't have the dough. And even if we had the dough, we don't feel like spending it on that.
Go ahead,
or if we do feel like spending on it, we'll voluntarily give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to add, I think we should build a border around the welfare state. I think that's probably the best alternative.
It's Bob Wenzel calls it the welfare wall. That's the wall. We need the welfare wall.
So let's say the labor is coming in here. There's no free flow of labor because prices and incentives have been distorted in the country. So the labor is not going to where it's most valued and where it can most add to the productive sectors of the economy. That's kind of how I see it when you have wage controls, price controls, and so on.
Now, of course, the best thing that could happen for everybody concerned would be, because of course what will often happen in a lot of these countries is that, not always, but in a lot of cases, there's a brain drain from countries where they say, my home country is so hopeless from the point of view of an entrepreneur or just making a basic living that I've got to get out of here. So all the people who have the wherewithal to do it and have the skills leave, and so the country, I don't want to think like a collectivist, but in other words, their neighbors don't ever get to enjoy the benefits of their skills because the political elites have made it impossible for them to use those skills.
Precisely.
So it would be nice for countries to has led by example. They have a society where the state is, not where I'd like it to be, but much more restrained. They have much more prosperity. You don't see people flowing out of Hong Kong looking for a better life. It'd be great if they could have a good life where they are, so that, again, you don't have a situation where the cream of the crop leave, and then how are people supposed to ever really build?
Mm-hmm. Good point. I'm going to shift it now, actually, to markets. Kevin, I know you had a question on markets too, on the Federal Reserve.
Actually,
right?
I'm going to switch it up because this is one I want to know about, because I know you've talked about the Civil War before. Excuse me. And I read some interesting comments you made in the past about the Civil War and about Abraham Lincoln, and I want to know: was the Civil War about slavery or was it about states' rights? Was Abe Lincoln, in your opinion, a good guy or a bad guy?
All right. I actually have a more nuanced view on this than I think people think. I would say that the secession of the southern states, at least the first 7 of them, certainly had to do with slavery. I mean, I think we have to take them at their word. They came right out and said,
Right.
That's why we're seceding. So I don't see any reason to read into tea leaves or a Ouija board to figure out why they seceded if they came right out and said it. But it's a separate question, what was the war about? Because you can have a secession without a war. There have been plenty of peaceful secessions in world history. Why was there a war? Well, the war certainly was not about slavery. And, I mean, that's something that really any historian will tell you. Now, the average American doesn't know that, but really even just a mainstream historian, like if you ask David Donald at Harvard, did Lincoln launch the war to free the slaves? He'll come right out and tell you, of course he didn't, and he came right out and said that. If the southern states would just come back, I'll amend the Constitution to make sure we can never abolish slavery. How about that? I mean, that was all said. Now, of course, as we know later on, the abolition of slavery became a war aim, because the war was not going as well for the North as Lincoln would like, and so he introduced the Emancipation Proclamation. But that's a separate thing. If you're asking me what was the deal with the war itself, then I would say it had to do more with 19th century nationalism and the idea that the state is indivisible. Like, it is metaphysically unthinkable that you could envision the United States as being different units. That is an impossibility, according to the nationalist logic of Lincoln, Daniel Webster, Alexander Hamilton, Henry Clay, Joseph Story, all the people who spun out the nationalist theory of the Union. It's a metaphysical impossibility. Therefore, the states are actually in a condition of rebellion. They can't be independent because that is a metaphysical impossibility. Well, to my mind, that is a provably false reading of the American founding. And I have argued that. I have a whole chapter in my book Nullification called What Are or What Is the United States Anyway? And I go and I show that the evidence is just overwhelming that the United States was conceived of as a plurality of societies. That's why the Constitution refers to the United States in the plural, not in the singular, throughout the document, to emphasize that it's a group of societies. But for Lincoln, it was one indivisible whole. And unfortunately, that has been one of the worst ideas of modern times, of thinking of the state as being this indivisible whole. It's one indivisible power center that's infallible, that's irresistible. That model of political organization spread all through the world and yielded us totalitarian revolutions, total war, genocide. So yes, it's true that a very powerful state can do good things. No kidding. But it can also do truly horrifying things on a previously unimaginable scale.
Just a follow-up question. Have you heard of Adam Friedman? I know he's used you in his book, The Naked Constitution. He's quoted you in there on war powers.
Oh, that makes me feel guilty for not being familiar with him,
Yeah,
actually.
very good, actually. He wrote a book called The Less Perfect Union. Just came out this summer. He's also a Harvard grad. Went to Oxford as well. He wrote that it was the southern states that were using the federal government because the northern states were interposing on these fugitive slave laws, on laws that
Right.
the southern states, right. So it was basically, they've muddied the term states' rights and turned it into this thing about slavery today. When I think it was Carl Schurz that first, was speaking for, who was an abolitionist and was talking about the North needs to use the doctrine of interposition in order to combat the South's use of the federal government to impose these slavery laws in the North, of which they find unconstitutional or disagree with.
Yeah, it's funny how opposite of the conventional wisdom the historical record winds up being. That you see in my book Nullification, I even talk about in the 1850s in Wisconsin, you had people having mass public meetings in which they said, we must protect our state sovereignty against these federal courts that would have us return runaway slaves without giving them the opportunity for a trial. And they would even quote the forbidden John C. Calhoun by name and say, you know, his teaching on this point is correct, that the states have to have a right to resist. Because their argument was, even though there's a fugitive slave clause in the Constitution, that does not mean the federal government is thereby empowered to do absolutely anything to chase after runaway slaves. So they said that is unconstitutional, void, and of no
Yeah.
force, and it won't be enforced here. And in fact, when you look at the reasons that South Carolina gave for seceding in December 1860, one of them, in fact, is that the northern states were nullifying.
Right.
And in fact, Jefferson Davis, in his farewell address to the Senate, said that I'm sick and tired of the North nullifying. And yet every time you bring up nullification, people say, oh, the terrible South. No, it's just the opposite. The South was seceding because they were tired of the North nullifying.
Right.
What would the South have had to nullify? All the laws were in its favor.
Right, exactly. So it's people say, I hear people say a lot that it was the federal government imposing its will on the southern states when it was kind of the opposite. States' rights was a call of the abolitionists, and I don't know how it turned into the states' rights. If you say it, somehow you're a racist. I mean, in most modern actually history books, they use it as some sort of a term for what is it? Microaggression, a racist term.
Yeah. And you know what's also interesting is to read Lysander Spooner. And no one's libertarian credentials are better than his. He was as anti-slavery as could be. I mean, he had a hand in the John Brown raid. He was a correspondent of John Brown. He contributed to John Brown. Nobody questioned his anti-slavery credentials, but he said this whole war thing is just a sham. And it's based on a false idea. And his view was that certainly there is both a right of secession and a natural right for the slaves to rise up and assert their freedom. And he wanted to see both of these things carried out. And it's very, very rare to find somebody who takes both of those views. The only person I know as a historian who does is, of course, our friend Jeff Hummel, who wrote a book called Emancipating Slaves, Enslaving Free Men, that gives kind of a radical libertarian overview of the whole issue.
Kevin, do you have any follow-ups?
No, why don't we go on to Maddie? Seems
right.
like we're running out
Okay,
of
and I'm
time.
sorry to have to cut
That's
things
okay.
short, but I'll have to make this the last one, and maybe I can come back sometime.
Okay.
Sure.
That was good. My friend Skylar Leda, you might know him. He had a few questions. One of them is regarding anarcho-capitalism. Do you consider yourself an ANCAP? I'll skip over that one if not.
I do, but I should say I do not consider myself an advanced theorist of it, which is why I don't talk about it much. I don't have anything new to contribute, and if you gave me some tricky puzzle, I probably wouldn't know how to solve it, and I'd go crying to Bob Murphy.
All right, maybe I'll message Bob Murphy instead. All right, so another question he had was, do you agree with the evidence that economic sanctions can sometimes be effective at getting foreign governments to comply with desired objectives, as shown by Daniel Dresner's research, and for example, with the recent nuclear agreement with Iran? If you don't know who Daniel Dresner is, neither do I.
Okay. Well, the thing is, I'm not familiar with the evidence.
Okay, yeah.
The thing is, I've never thought that it's completely impossible that sanctions could lead a government to change its mind. I think it's at least plausible that happened in the case of South Africa. I mean, that's at least plausible.
Honestly, that's the only example I've heard of sanctions working is South Africa. So I think, yeah, that's probably the example.
Yeah. So as I say, I'd have to see exactly what his arguments are, but my position is not dogmatically that sanctions can't conceivably work, but just that simply it's very hard that when you come up with examples, you can count them on one hand.
Yeah, exactly.
And that people who impose them often are doing so, I think, not in good faith. They're doing so in the full knowledge that what they really want is to be able to say the sanctions have failed, and then they can go to war.
Right.
I mean, if sanctions worked, a lot of the warmongers wouldn't try using them.
Yeah, it's actually
They'd take their opportunity away.
Anyone else want to comment before Tom leaves?
I just got one question, a yes or no answer. What do you think do you support the Iran deal? Yes or no?
If I have to answer it with a yes or a no, I'll say yes.
Okay, all right.
But I did do a show on this. If you look at tomwoods.com/episodes, I got Stephen Walt from Harvard to come on, and the episode was called "The Myth of a Better Deal," because you hear people like Ted Cruz or Donald Trump saying, I would have gotten a better deal. And he says, well, all right, I want some specifics. What would that deal have looked like? And tell me the probability that you could have gotten that deal. I don't mean that you could have imagined one. I'm talking about could you have gotten one. That was the issue that we talked about. It was kind of interesting.
I agree with you.
You know, Will, I think for our next show we could have a Alan West versus Tom Woods SmackDown.
Well, we had Alan West on to talk about the Iran deal.
No, we'll get Scott Horton on, because Scott will steamroll anybody.
All right. Well, next week, actually, thank you so much for coming on, Tom. I know you're going to run.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, great seeing you guys.
And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back sometime. I'd love to have him back. Yeah. Anyway.
I've actually, I've been reading Tom since I was 17, so I've known about him for like a whole year.
Right.
Yeah.
That was it.
See, I'm doing my own age jokes now.
So you knew him since you were 17, so that's what, 5 years from now?
Yeah.
That was a good show. Look, I was surprised. I was shocked at his that he wasn't as dogmatic as most make him out to be.
About Lincoln, I was surprised about his.
No, I don't think anybody with a reasonable mind said that Lincoln went to war to preserve slavery. That's the claim was, why did the South go to war? Right. And it was clearly because of slavery. Lincoln wanted to preserve the Union. Yes. You see, so that no one, I don't know any scholar in the right mind that says Lincoln went to war to end slavery. No, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't about ending slavery. It was about taking the slaves away from the South to better enhance the chances of the North to win. I mean, I liked that it was. I thought he was. I really liked his answer on immigration. I was surprised. I mean, here where libertarians are taking this dogmatic position on Kevin, what do you think about that? Where they take the dogmatic position on immigration. I mean, he seemed pretty level-headed. What do you think?
No, he did. I mean, I'm so used to hearing this all or nothing, this very this approach that basically says it's my way or the highway. And I think he came. I mean, his answer on the Iran sanctions was a little. I mean, he said, yeah, he's in support of it, and you know.
Well, I mean, what's a better deal? How about not lifting sanctions for one until we get what we want? I mean, we're just we're handing over a terrorist regime money. I mean, that no deal is a better deal. I don't know. See it as a myth. I see it as actually worse off.
To say that he sort of had the shotgun blast of answers that I wasn't. You know, he was all over the place. I wasn't quite expecting him to have some of the answers that he did. He's not as dogmatic, like you said, as some of our other guests or the people we're used to hearing.
But he is right that, I mean, Iran and the position they're in, and especially with the Iran deal, at the end of the day, we're either going to go to Iran or we're not, or go to war with Iran or we're not. Like,
why is it that?
I don't think
hold on a second.
Or anything like that are going to make a difference.
Let me correct you. He said the myth of the better deal. This is the myth of this is the false dilemma. I mean, there is no deal or more. It doesn't work that way. We had sanctions that have been working and will work and continue to work, but we're just lifting them and not getting anything in return. They do their own inspections, for God's sake. Okay, literally, no deal.
But regardless of the sanctions in place or not, at the end of all of it, whichever way it went, we're either going to go to war with Iran or we're not.
No, we're not.
That's what I'm saying.
So would you say the same thing about the Soviet Union? We're either going to go to war or not? I mean, Reagan came up with a strategy.
I don't think the Soviet Union was crazy. I think Iran is a little.
Right, exactly. They're a terrorist regime. So are you saying to give them $150 billion in their coffers to fight against? They're literally fighting a war.
I agree with all of it. That part I don't agree with.
That's that's what it's predicated on. That was our leverage.
You know what? Nobody's answered this adequately in my mind.
So hot.
You're not hot. You're sweltering there. Just nobody's answered this in my mind the right way, or at least to my satisfaction. The one defense that I've heard that actually works of the Iran deal is that sanctions were going to fall apart, and that we should get something before they fell apart, because Russia and China were not going to continue the sanctions that are on Iran indefinitely, and if we backed out of the deal, they were going to back out of sanctions. I mean, and
that's fine.
And if you look at it that way, isn't it better than to get something than nothing?
Exactly.
No.
We're going to go to war with them at some point in time.
Tell me what we got.
Later.
Somebody tell me what we got. I'd like to know what we got. What?
Oh, we didn't get anything.
No kidding.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not in favor of these. I'm just saying nobody's actually come out and give me a good argument to say that somehow if we kept the sanctions going, that they were going to continue to have the same bite that they did, because China and Russia are going to back out of these sanctions.
It does.
Russia and China are going to start.
That's fine. It was a miracle.
in place, it's not going to make a difference.
It was a miracle we got them to put these sanctions in Iran in the first place. First of all, it was under a different administration. This administration has shown feckless leadership. Look at what China and Russia are doing. They're carrying joint military operations off the coast of Alaska. These are things that are off the coast of South America. These are things that were unheard of 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
You have Russia and the Crimea over there. You have them. They're expanding every day. You have them moving. You have the South moving into the Southeast Asian Sea. They're taking over parts of Japanese territory. So look, we're in a different. We're looking at it through the lens of today, as opposed to prior foreign policy strategies that have been far more successful. Shut up, Kevin.
No,
why are you sweating there?
That's the wrong answer. The right answer. The right answer is let China and Russia lift their sanctions. We should have kept them, as well as Europe,
Yes,
and as well as everybody else, kept them in place.
Europe,
That's the answer I was waiting for somebody to say, and nobody has yet to say it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we totally agree on that. And to my point, I don't think Europe is going to want to maintain sanctions because they're going to want cheaper oil, and I think it would be harder for them to keep sanctions. Though we obviously have more influence over Europe than we do China and Russia. I mean, look at Russia giving them intercontinental ICBMs. They're literally giving ground-to-air missiles to protect their nuclear sites. You got to be kidding me. And then we're like, it's a great deal. I mean, come on. So I don't know. I mean, I guess brilliant, good minds can talk about it all day long, but we got to move on. I think that Tom Woods I was surprised. I don't know if anyone else was.
I was.
I don't know. What do you think, Grant? Do you think it's like a lot of libertarians see a very anarcho-capitalist libertarians see him as a luminary, and I think like they do with other people, they misrepresent his positions.
Yeah, I listened to his podcast earlier about the refugee crisis. He had some guy on from Ron Paul Institute, which is obviously a very libertarian think tank, and they were both kind of the same expression that he made in our show, was that if everyone had property, if everyone you were crossing someone's property line as opposed to a national border line, you would quite literally be walking onto someone's home, which is much different than that. But even so, as libertarians, you have to recognize that these kinds of human crises happen at times. Even if there's a state or no state, they happen. Yep. So what do you do in a situation where, from what they made it sound like hundreds of thousands of people are just kind of trying to get somewhere, and that somewhere could be your backyard, and it could come out of your fiscal pocket.
Right.
So for libertarians, that's really difficult. Especially for dogmatic libertarians.
Okay.
How would you react to that? If Hungary, if the Eastern Europe was randomly full of dogmatic libertarian countries, what the hell would happen?
Right.
Yeah, Finland. I think it's Finland. It was actually going to be raising taxes to pay for refugees they're taking on. So yeah, there is a private cost to it for citizens.
Okay, let me get to Kevin on this immigration thing. He posted, not immigration. I'm sorry, the refugee situation in the Middle East. I mean, okay, it's terrible what's going on. The thing with that is we don't know who's in extremis and who is not in extremis. You have Germany saying we'll take 500,000 people. Well, if I'm living in the Middle East and we're going to see ya, I'm out, whether I'm in extremis or not, whether I need to leave, whether I'm an actual refugee or not. You've just created incentives for people who may not be a refugee to come to your country. That little boy that drowned, that was a fellow who lived relatively peacefully in Turkey, and he wanted to get better health care or health care benefits, and put his family in a boat, and his wife and child died. I mean, we're looking at it as though he's escaping some war-torn country. I'm not saying Turkey's a great place to live. I'm not going to make that claim. But, I mean, how many of these people do we know are really in extremis? You have the Middle Eastern countries that aren't even taking them in. They're concerned about terrorism.
Well, Tom Woods, in his show, he said a lot of them, he said a lot of them are, well-dressed. And his guess is the same thing he was researching, and a lot of them are, well-dressed, clean-cut, they're very well maybe these countries middle class and industrial class saying we need to get the hell out of here.
Does it matter what class they come from, what they're fleeing?
No. It's not about.
No. What I'm saying is they don't fit the typical disparate refugee look. And a lot of them. A lot of them don't.
So I mean, you can look at Mexico and the same. Are they all refugees? I mean, I'm sure they're living in similar circumstances. If we were to say yes, we're going to take 1 million refugees, what do you think would happen at the border? And what responsibility do we have to that? And how much can Hungary, a small Eastern European country, can't absorb that many immigrants? It just can't do it and survive.
Well, isn't it Hungary where that the government has said that they don't want the immigrants to come in because it's going to change their country's value system, and they're a Christian country and so forth.
Well, yeah,
And
it'll change their culture.
yeah, and it's going to change their culture, and now you've got the Western media coming down on Hungary as if they're barbarians
They're
for
evil.
saying that. I think these people, no matter what background they come from, are going to flee. You know, even if it's just for economic opportunity. But a lot of these people are definitely fleeing violence. But you're going to flee to the first place that'll take you. And like the poor little boy who died, I mean, he went to Turkey, and then he had family in Canada, and they tried to get, and they wanted him to go to Europe or something. The story was something like that. But the point is, you've got a lot of people, way more than in the last few years, they're fleeing. They're refugees. Something like I think it was it's doubled since 2010. The amount of refugees in the world has doubled since 2010. And if you actually look at the numbers, and I haven't done the post yet, I'm working on a post for UA, but if you look at the numbers, most of the new refugees are coming from the Middle East, and most of them are the direct responsibility of what has happened in Iran and Afghanistan and Syria, and most of that is a direct responsibility, well, not directly, but it has happened because of American intervention over there. So the question becomes, is America responsible for taking in more of these refugees? They just announced today that they're going to take in, over the next fiscal year, the U.S. is going to take in 10,000 refugees from Syria.
Let me follow up with that.
Sure. And Germany's taking in 800,000.
The Syrian war, a lot of these are coming from Syria. Where was the intervention? Where was the American intervention? Was it Obama's policy?
Those fled. The rebels came from Iraq.
Oh, you mean ISIS?
ISIS. A lot of that developed in Iraq. I mean,
no. ISIS didn't develop in Iraq. It first developed in Syria, and then
a lot of their success, a lot of their wealth is coming from Iraq. And Iraq is, I mean, looking back, it was a horrible idea to take down Saddam.
I agree that some of their military equipment certainly came from American depots. There's no doubt, but their wealth came from taking oil wells.
Do you think they would be as successful as they are now if it wasn't for the feckless government of Iraq?
Oh, most definitely. But to that point, I think we pulled out our troops way too early.
Yes.
And certainly that was American policy. But now, to your point, Syria and the war wasn't the fault of America. Assad's regime and the fighters there wasn't necessarily America's fault. We largely stayed out of the Syrian conflict. I think you can make an argument that we probably should have helped oust Assad at some point. There's great arguments against that. There's arguments for it. I'm not saying that. But a myriad arguments can stem from this, and I don't know really who's at fault here. I don't know. I think the Middle East has been a powder keg for however long, over 1,000 years. I don't know if it's American strategy per se. Certainly we've had influence, and you're right about Iraq, no doubt. But I mean, it's really hard to say how much of it is really our responsibility, and how much responsibility the Europeans give to us. I mean, they literally do nothing.
I want to follow up on that. We have been in the Middle East in various ways for far beyond the Iraq War. Like I'm talking, like.
Give me an example.
When the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, we were a huge.
We were liberating the Afghans. Yeah.
We've been in Kuwait. We've been in.
Liberated them.
Okay, but my point is the American fingers have been in the Middle East for.
Right, but you're equating liberation with some sort of like imposition.
But liberation or not, whatever our intentions, are they better off today than when we first set foot in there?
Are they better off from what point in relation to what? I don't know if
from when they started, from when we first got there. Are they better off today after decades and decades of our own various types of meddlings and the money that we sunk into it? Are they noticeably better off today?
I don't think they have been better off or well off in 1,000 years.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you.
So I don't know.
What I'm trying to say is, I don't think they're any better off. Arguably worse off.
In Jordan, they're well off.
The whole splat of attempts that we have made to engineer that side of the world have been a complete failure. And
I agree. There's been certain failures, but I think we look at this when we look at economics, and rarely do people address culture. They largely have a culture they don't have a civil society there.
The Muslim culture is not very industrious at all.
Yeah, not Muslims per se, more so Arab culture is they're not. It's not about industry. It's just that they have a culture where it's about division and diversity. You see where the problem with this diversity is? You have three sects in Iraq. You have the Kurds, the Shia, and the Sunni, and they all hate each other. And they never regard themselves as individual. They're always part of a group. This is a throwback ideology. It lacks civil society, and what diversion does is foment these wars and them killing one another. Oh, you're a Kurdi, boom, done. You're not an individual. You're not whoever. You're not Bob. You're not Dave. You're a Sunni. I'm a Shia. Let's kill each other. I mean, that's literally what goes on, and it's this. It's the lack of it's their culture necessarily. I mean, that's why people are fleeing there, and they don't want. And this is what these other countries don't want. They don't want that culture coming there. I mean, Hungary or Ukraine, Hungary, they were under the iron fist of the Soviet Union. They don't want to have these certain conflicts coming back. They're barely even making it now. If you look at their economies, they're relatively stagnant. They really don't know. I mean, go ahead. I can go on.
Well, I understand what you mean, and I agree with you that it's really just a cultural conflict. But I think what a lot of libertarians believe, including myself, is that not only is it an impossible conflict to solve, but it's not our responsibility to solve it.
I agree, but
regardless of the
totally agree.
Regardless of who does what over there to each other, it's not our problem at the end of the day. And the more we try to make it our problem, the more we have refugee crises and ISIS and terror groups trying to attack us, and it just we kind of poke the powder keg and it blows up, and then we're surprised that they hate us.
Let me ask really quick. I'm going to ask this to Matty because he hasn't mentioned anything, so I'm going to ask him the politically incorrect question of the day. 100 years ago, up until basically World War II, the Brits and other colonial powers essentially set up friendly dictatorships in the Middle East to basically control the local populations, and it led to a certain amount of stability.
Post-Ottoman Empire, you mean?
Yeah, and it led up to a certain amount of stability. Was that the way to go? I mean, it's politically incorrect to actually ask that question, but if you look at what's happened since the democratic movement and since the overthrow of so many of these dictatorships, wasn't it more stable beforehand?
I mean, technically, yes. And I mean, one benefit of dictatorships is stability. I mean, if you look at areas where the mob controls in Italy or even in New York many years ago, it was very stable there. So yes, technically, it's that is a benefit, but of course, there's just the trade-off of freedom versus stability.
Then were we wrong to tear down Saddam, for example?
I would say yes. I mean, I don't know if ISIS would have arisen had Saddam still been in charge.
I give you credit for answering it truthfully, but it's a tough question. But it's one I've heard, and it's.
Why do you say it's politically incorrect?
I'm glad you came to the resident history expert of the panel.
Kevin, why do you say it's not politically correct?
Because if you say that we should have left Saddam in power, or if you tell any of the mainstream media that the democratic movements that tore down places over there, which has led to so much, in hindsight, has led to so much destruction and death. If you say that that's a bad thing, they'll ignore all the death and destruction and say, no, it's better that these people are free now.
I don't know. I think that's more in the right that would say that.
What's that?
I think that's more people in the right than the left.
Could be.
I agree, but I don't think the left would take their share of the responsibility. I mean, it certainly hasn't been perpetuated by just the right.
Oh, no, of course, but I mean, come on. It's been painted for 15 years as a war of the right.
Exactly.
I mean, so, look, yeah, you're right. I mean, we invaded the wrong country. No doubt about that. I don't know. But the thing is, I don't know who here on this panel knows the intelligence at the time.
I mean, making calls on the ground or whatever you got to do.
It's hard to look. It's hard to say these things. Go ahead, Matt.
I do like being able to make people look like idiots when I have 20/20 hindsight.
Right. And this is what I want to move on to. Maddie, can you tell us about the videos that you're doing with We Are Capitalists that have been getting very popular?
Yeah, me and my friend Jay from We Are Capitalists we're going to release a video a week. Me and him are scripting them. Sometimes bringing on some extra help. I think Grant actually might be contributing to one, if I remember correctly. And we're just doing short, 1 to 2 minute videos. Basically, the format is we have narration, and he uses some software where he can draw almost like on a chalkboard, but it shows what he's talking about graphically. And they're doing pretty well. The one I wrote in gun control got 300 or so thousand hits. We have one out, the other week on the claim that unions created the 40-day work week. And next week we're going to have one out on the claim that the minimum wage would be like $20 an hour if you index it to productivity, which is an actual claim people make. Elizabeth Warren has claimed it. Robert Reich has also made the same claim.
Yeah, well, they're both like economic geniuses. Certainly,
Yes.
Robert Reich, he's at Berkeley. But that's where can they find those? Where can you find those videos?
Right now, just go on We Are Capitalists. We're probably going to have a YouTube channel up within 1 or 2 weeks, though, as
I
well.
hear some banging on your end, Matty. Are you like tapping your foot? Something's banging.
Yeah, that was me. My bad.
Oh, for God's sake, Matthew. Now, this
I'll
also
never learn.
all the information you just gave me begs the question: why hasn't Kevin thought of this video making strategy yet?
I have thought of it. I was just hoping you guys would take over.
Kevin is too old to make videos.
Yeah, how do you
Make a radio program.
Has you
Just
did
go
your
on
son?
the TubeView. Just go on the TubeView. TubeView.org.
Does your son help you turn your computer on, Kevin?
No, I'm still learning Morse code.
Oh boy. I'm just seriously. I'm shocked with Tom Woods. Very reasonable. I thought there were. I just don't know why I got most of my information from people like the ANCAPs that generally follow him.
I think if we have him on again, or if we had him on for longer, we might have hit some nerves, or we might have found some things that.
I don't know. You're right. Certainly. But I mean, a nullification and interposition, both conflated, and I would want him to see if he can clear that up. Nullification used like as a state veto, a state nullifies a federal law. I think that's what he meant when he said nullification. But I'd have to read his book on nullification, because Adam Friedman uses nullification and interposition interchangeably. But he knows he's separated the difference. I've heard him in interviews separate the two and provide more nuance. Which leads me to my next question, Grant. Have you read any more of the Naked Constitution?
Yes, I have. I'm on like page 125 right now.
Easy read. It's not that difficult.
Well, I have a job. All right, I don't sit around and eat ramen noodles like you all day.
Great works, guys, just so you know.
It's not ramen. It's ramen.
It is a really great book. Right now, I'm on the Commerce Clause, and he's talking about explaining the Commerce Clause.
It's good.
It's definitely eye-opening. I didn't really know much about constitutional law as a libertarian. I still think the Constitution is an imperfect document in some ways.
Certainly, it's an imperfect document.
At least in my own reading of it myself. But he's definitely convinced me otherwise in a few areas. But it's a great book.
It's a wonderful document. The market is imperfect. But the market is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, it just has, it has flaws. I think that was just maybe a context issue. I don't know, but it's a good book.
He doesn't have it. The document doesn't have as many flaws as Kevin does, though. I bet we can agree on that.
It's actually younger.
Yeah. But that was pretty good. Pretty good, Grant. Did you had a piece that came out this week, right, Grant?
Yeah, I had something on Modern Libertarian.
You want to legalize meth, I heard.
Yeah, I want to legalize all drugs. I'm going to start doing a lot more about drug prohibition and trying to get that repealed. I think that'd be a huge budgetary savior. But I'm also coming out. I interviewed this lady, a friend of mine. She's a PhD, and she's trying to open a clinic to help kids with behavioral issues. So for people like Matt, to go there. And but basically, she's remained anonymous, but she's been slapped with, of course, the regulation costs and the Medicaid ordeals and all the certifications, and I interviewed her, so I'm going to have a little write-up about that out probably next week.
Cool. Okay, and you post this all to your Modern Libertarian?
Yeah, it might be on. It'll probably go back too.
And post it on Unbiased America on our website because you're on our panel. You should maybe start posting things there, stupid idiot.
Oh yeah.
You have a login, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had my same-sex marriage piece on there. Pissed so many people off.
Good.
Yeah, Did you read that, Grant?
I read half of it.
It's not an easy read.
Long.
It's not an easy read. It's
easy read if you take 10-hour poops.
Yeah, he's on page 125 of that one too.
God, I hate you guys. I don't know. Anything you? I mean, we can get into our winners and losers segment, but I know that none of you guys picked any.
No, I didn't. I did Donald Trump again.
You is he your loser?
Yeah, dude. He was talking about Ben Carson, and he was just like, "Yeah, Ben Carson was an okay doctor."
Okay.
Who's your winner then? Give me your winner.
Winner? Shit. I guess actually Ben Carson probably, because he's actually tied with Trump in the polls right now.
Wrong.
I think Iowa.
Wrong.
Is it in Iowa or is it New Hampshire? One of the two, Kevin.
No, I'm saying your winner is wrong. The winner of the week is Tom Brady, and you guys are wrong about everybody else. Tom Brady, who's about to start the first game, which he was not supposed to start, is going to start tonight right after this. So
Yeah,
he's
my
the winner of the
girlfriend,
week.
she's hammering me to watch this game right now.
I'm not watching that game. Screw that game.
Yeah, you woman.
I'm not watching it. Who cares about Tom Shady and Bill Belichick? Yeah, you would like him though, Kevin. You're in New England, right?
For the third week in a row, my loser of the week is Will Ricciardella, however you say his last name.
God, what a bigot. It's Ricciardella.
Yeah, whatever. It's just, seriously, you come out, you're wrong about Woods. You came on expecting him to go all crazy off, and you were completely wrong about him, and you're probably going to be wrong next week, and, you're just not a good host, you're not a good person on this panel. You're not a good person. You don't look good. I think you froze. Did you freeze? Yeah.
And he never has any interview questions?
Never. And he's got the same shirt on every single week. You're going to be the loser of the week every week, as far as I'm concerned.
Grant, you got any winners?
My loser of the week is Austin Peterson. I'm just going to be a troll. Austin Peterson, he's running for president. And my winner is his rival, Gary Johnson. They will probably get all of 0.08% of the vote. No, but I wish him the best of luck in his running election.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, I think that's pretty
shake
cool.
things up a little bit.
I don't know. We'll see. You get the right amount of signatures, you do what you got to do, and you get right in there. Good for him.
He'll be on a ballot in one state.
Grant Peterson's actually going to have a profit-sharing plan for his volunteers.
Oh, is he really? Okay,
No,
I'll be sure to participate.
No, I'm just making shit up.
Yeah, it'll take you 6 months though before you get paid.
That was the joke.
I don't know what that means. You're all a bunch of idiots. But that was a good show, guys. I don't have a winner and loser this week. I didn't really think about it, but I don't really care this week, to be honest.
You're a loser. I want to watch football. So
my loser is the one-sided academia and the intellectual class who just spout.
Okay, you've been reading too much Thomas Sowell. You've been reading his new book. I can
tell. No, I haven't. But I mean, Hayek really speaks to intellectuals quite well. He's wrong on their motives. Shut up, guys.
Oh,
I hate you.
Okay,
I am the most boring one on the panel, aren't I?
Yeah.
I am. Shit, I hate you guys. All right. Anyway, for Grant Phillips from the Modern Libertarian, Kevin from Unbiased America, Maddie from Being Classically Liberal, and myself, Will Ricciardella from The Analytical Conservative and the best admin at Unbiased America Live. We'll see you next time. Next week is Wayne Allen Root. The following week, we don't know. And then the week after that is Adam Friedman. So we're trying to get a good lineup of guests for you guys. Yes, we are trying to get a liberal person on the panel. It's proven to be a bit more difficult.
Let's get Adam Elliott on.
Yeah, Adam Elliott. That guy.
All right.
Brilliant. All right. Go watch the game, Grant. Get lost.
Shut up.
All right, bye.